this and that and what the fuck else, episode 143. This past week I did not do many of the news programs, and I did more news flashes and a few single subject skidmarks. I'm also working on changing the format of some of my programs. I've decided to drop the photograph discussion and the slideshows from the news programs. I will find a way to bring that back in a program where, and in presentations where it's dedicated to the fine things in life. This was a rough week politically, and there was a lot of commotion about Xi Jinping's visit to Russia, and that visit has really got the West on an edge. They don't know how to manage it. They can see the inevitable is happening, and they don't know how to cope. Where if you had decent, professional diplomats in the shithouse and in Brussels, diplomat would tell you the best way to handle it is the diplomatic way, and look at the facts and look at the reality and find a solution. The days of demanding and instructing is over, and the West must make peace with it. Their days of ruling the globe is done. That Western empire is collapsing, and it is collapsing fast. Their main problem is, their answer has always been force, and the Ukraine war has made it quite clear that their force is no longer a formidable force. It is at best a matching force, and they don't know how to handle with it. They are used to instruct or demand or to threaten, and the countries listened. Those days are over. Now, there is a lot of other things that is happening, and this is a very disturbing thing. South Africa voted yes and will support the treaty that will allow the WHO to basically call the shots during a healthcare crisis. Other African countries did not vote, and there were African countries that voted against it, because that means if the WHO, take note, if the WHO declares a pandemic, they take control over the country. And this is what blacks did to South Africa. I have said it many times. The only true patriots are the white people in South Africa, the Afrikaners, because they fought and shed blood for this country. These blacks are giving it away. They're too weak to defend the country. And then we get to that absolute madness of how the West reacted to Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow. Journalist, have you seen how the West reacts to the success of the negotiations? Medvedev, I think they are rejoicing along with us. Journalist, they are furious. Medvedev, very good. It makes me very happy. That is classic Medvedev. Then there's a little bit of a blast from the past. What a great pleasure is re-watching this video of Joe Biden in 1997 vintage. And Biden said the following. And the Russians said to me, if you keep expanding NATO, we may have to look to China. I nearly laughed. I said, Good luck. If that doesn't work out, try Iran. And the commentator says, I can't help but ask, is the mechanical grandfather having as much fun now? I'm sure not. And then the following two clips is to indicate the difference between America and China when it comes to diplomacy. John Kirby, US National Security Council coordinator. President Xi saw fit to fly all the way to Moscow, hasn't talked once to President Zelensky, hasn't visited Ukraine. He and his regime keeps parroting the Russian propaganda that this is somehow a war of the West on Russia. That is some sort of existential threat to Putin. And his compatriots has said it openly, and it's been published, that the aim of the war in the Ukraine is to weaken Russia. But listen to the shit that he spews now. And then the Chinese responded. Wang Wenbin, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman. President Xi Jinping's visit to Russia is a journey of friendship, cooperation and peace. We call on the US to reflect on its own role in the Ukraine issue. Stop fueling the flames and stop deflecting the blame on China. We will continue to stand firm on the side of peace and dialogue and on the right side of history. Compare the two and ask yourself, who is the adult in the room? And then we get to this. It was a news conference. US hegemony is weakening as more countries turn their backs on Washington. A recent report indicates that despite around 140 countries condemning the Ukraine conflict, some 85% of the world's population does not participate in the Western sanctions against Russia. Think about that numbers. But the West don't listen. And then we get this. The world should listen to China's position on the war in Ukraine to help reach a solution to the conflict. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. It seems like there are people, statesmen in the EU and in the West that is willing to face the reality. And then we get to this one, and what an absolute disappointment this chick turned out to be. Italy's Meloni ready to risk unpopularity over support for Ukraine. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said that we will continue to support Ukraine no matter how it affects the level of support for our government by the population. What the fuck is that? And they talk about democracy. Listen to what she says. And this is the exact same words that Annalena Dambak uttered when she was in Kiev. Dambak said she doesn't care what the voters want. They're going to pay for this. And then we get to this one. And this chick is the one that wants more weapons to Ukraine. This is the one that suggested that the Ukraine is giving nuclear arms. And listen to what she says now. Eastern Europe should head NATO and the EU. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas said she believed the more recent members of NATO and the EU, the bloc's eastern members, should be put in charge of the organizations. Kallas told Politico that the nations of Eastern Europe have proven themselves over the years as valuable members of the two organizations, while never having been at the top of their political structure. Now, first of all, you know my opinion about chicks in charge. think about what she's saying here. My question is this: what does the Baltic states contribute to the EU? What? Economically, financially, militarily? They contribute nothing. Nothing. They are being financed by the EU. Without the EU, they are bankrupt. That's the truth. Without the EU, they will not last a week. That's the truth. And yet, they want to be in charge now. But they've got problems coming. The industrial, economical engine of the EU, Germany, is collapsing. They are being deindustrialized, and their economy is in tatters, as Van der Crazy said so enthusiastically. In tatters, I say. And now they want to be in charge. The European Union and NATO use these people with one goal, and that is to encroach on the Russian borders and get EU military bases and soldiers and missiles on the border of Russia. And we see what has happened in Ukraine. If that Ukraine thing is sorted out, the Baltics are in for a hard time. And then there is this interesting one. A coffins with portraits of Greta Thunberg and Ursula von der Leyen at the Polish protests. Fireworks are being set off at the EC office as miners rail against the EU's plan to limit methane emissions. And it's that same fucking methane emissions that they are using to kill the farms in the Netherlands. The EU citizens better wake up. And then we're back. America and their threats and their general attitude of they are in charge and you better not differ from the instructions that they give you, because threats, that is what they can do well. And this is on a gender issue. Uganda is passing an anti-LGBTQ bill. John Kirby warns that the US will pass economic sanctions on the African country if it goes through with the law. What the fuck do they think give them the right to dictate to Uganda how Uganda must manage their social things? What? Why? And look at that. If you don't listen, sanctions. And you're asking, and they're wondering why the whole of Africa has turned their back on the US. The US is done. They overplayed their hand. And then we get to this thing. World Athletics bans trans women from female events. Transgender athletes who have gone through male puberty will not be permitted to compete in female world ranking competitions from March 31, World Athletics President Sebastian Coe said. The decision came after consultations with several parties, including trans groups, he said, adding that the ruling was by no means forever and will be reviewed as more scientific evidence surfaces. The rules were also tightened around athletes with differences in sex development. Athletes require now to lower blood testosterone even further to be able to compete in the female categories. What the fuck is that? This was a simple test, a chromosome test. If it's an XY chromosome, you cannot compete against women. End of the story. Doesn't matter whether you've cut your dick off and you've acquired for yourself a great pair of tits. That doesn't make you a woman. Your chromosomes say you're a woman or a man. And that is it. And that's where it should end. But in the past year or so, many women, their dreams were shattered by these dick carriers that competes as women and take world records and all shit like that. This madness must stop. And Uganda said they don't have any room for this type of shit. And what does the US do? Threaten them with sanctions. The corrupt, morally bankrupt US. Actually bankrupt West. And then we get to BRICS. Putin invited to the BRICS summit in South Africa despite the arrest warrant. Russian President Vladimir Putin is invited to the BRICS summit in South Africa despite his arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court, according to South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor. According to her, the Russian leader is expected at the summit, which will be held in August, although the ICC warrant is some cause for concern. In the past, I have repeatedly pointed out double standards in world problems. There are many other countries involved conflicts, but none of them were interested in the ICC, she said. And good for Naledi. Tell them to take a hike. And South Africa should withdraw from this ICC. The African Union, as it's said in any case, all member states should actually withdraw from the ICC because the ICC is biased against South Africa. And then we get to this joke. US Treasury Secretary Yellen admits Russia and China challenging the dollar's hegemony. Certainly I want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency. Russia and China are motivated to try and develop a different system that does not involve the use of the dollar, but it is extremely difficult to do so, Yellen. And then the commentator says, they aren't even lying anymore, just admitting that they want to be and stay number one. And I've got news for Yellen. She thinks she knows. And then we have this. Way to go, Biden. You showed him right. We lost his oil supplies, and now he wants to shut down the US dollar because you are stupid beyond belief. And that comment was on this. Russia to use Chinese yuan instead of the US dollars to settle trade with Asia, Africa and Latin America. And just prior to this, I read to you that Yellen said it will be difficult to do. The world is done with the West. America as the world's prime terrorist and dictator is done. And then this is something that should make my Nazi stalker very excited. NATO member admits it has exhausted all means of arming Ukraine. The Czech Republic has already done everything it can to help Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. President Petr Pavel has said, we have not only delivered what we could from our own stocks, but also bought material abroad. The Czech Republic is still capable of producing some air defenses and ammunition that Ukraine needs, but the nation's capacity to produce more ammunition is limited due to workforce shortages, he added. But there are opportunities, for example, through bringing in workers from Ukraine. Good luck with that one. And to my Zazi stalker, they are out of things. You say they are not. Yeah, the president says he is. And then we get to this thing in Australia now. In the 70s, I had a friend that were part of the South African delegation to the UN. And one night we were having a braai and he said to me, we as South Africans are under severe pressure about the apartheid stories. But take note, once the world is done with us, they're going to turn on Australia. Australia, Aboriginal government voice vote due. A tearful Anthony Albanese announced the vote due to take place between October and December, which would see the Constitution amended to create a special parliamentary committee to consult on matters affecting indigenous people. If not now, when? A choked up Albanese asked during a media conference. For many, this moment has been a very long time in the making. The bill to create the referendum on the creation of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice Committee will be lodged next week, with the government hoping to pass it by June's end. Now, I've got news for Albanese. Get in touch with some of the old apartheid government officials and political commentators that knows what happened, and let them tell you about these separate committees for separate races. You are fucked. And then we get to the sanction stories, and this one made me laugh. Raiffeisen says no. The bank defies ECB order to leave Russia. The European Central Bank has ordered the Austrian bank group Raiffeisen Bank to close its business in Russia, Reuters reports, but has been met with stiff resistance. According to its spokespeople, the ECB does not demand Raiffeisen immediately leave the Russian market, but insists on the formation of an action plan to terminate the bank's activities in Russia. One of them specified that such a plan could include the sale or closure of the Russian division. However, Raiffeisen does not intend to provide such a plan, as officials reportedly consider the ECB's actions to be an unjustified interference. And the resistance is beginning. And then we get to this, and something that makes me very angry, but let's see where this goes. US strikes hit Syria overnight. The Pentagon has claimed the airstrikes were a revenge for a drone attack that targeted the US base, leaving one contractor dead. It blamed Iran-backed groups in the country for the UAV, with video on social media overnight showing explosions in oil fields near the border. Defense Chief Lloyd Austin said Joe Biden had signed off on the strikes to protect Americans abroad. Now, I've got news for the Defense Chief Lloyd Austin. Go and take a map and then look where the hell your base is situated in Syria. And then go and look at the realities of the day. Iran, Saudi, Iraq, and Syria are busy sorting their shit out. You are going to find your base in Syria isolated, with no logistical routes to connect. How are you going to protect that 900 soldiers you've got there? How? Think about that. Your days are over. Pack your soldiers up and take them home and go and protect your own southern border. And then this one is again for my Zazi stalker, and it should make his heart sing. Zelensky's war on the Orthodox continues as a priest is apprehended during a service in Chernovitsy, far west Ukraine. Are these Western values? My question to my Zazi stalker: why is your hero persecuting priests of the Orthodox Church? Not the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Think about it. But you are blind. And then we get to this one that made me really laugh. The Taliban has got a public relations account on Twitter. Hillary Clinton made this tweet: girls in Afghanistan should be going back to school tomorrow, but the Taliban is only allowing boys to be educated. And the Taliban answers her: you spent $700 million in our country trying to teach women and girls that there are 140 different genders. No wonder you lost to the orange gangster. You left a huge mess behind in Afghanistan, just like your husband did with that dress. Oh, the Americans are in. They are targets. And then we get to this crazy guy, and I have said it previously, I'm 100% sure he's got rabies. And this is on one of the channels that I follow, and they've got different topics every day under which they make some posts. And this one is talking shit. On today's episode of What Deranged Shit is Coming Out of US Senator Lindsey Graham's Mouth. Hint, it's crackers. We have the warmongering clown pressing the US Secretary of State Blinken to call Russia state sponsor of terrorism. Graham lambasts Washington for not giving Kiev regime more guns and ammo before beginning of the military operation, and not upping the ante against China for being best buddies with Russia. But Blinken looks uncomfortable as he rebuffs Lindsey, avoiding eye contact as he says that there are other ways to achieve what Graham wants. And the commentator says, hold your horses, Blinken. What Graham here clearly wants is all-out war. And this Lindsey Graham, he's the guy that said that Americans must start shooting Russian planes down in international spaces. He wants America to invade Mexico. This guy, as I said, I'm sure he's got rabies. And then we get to that what the fuck moment, and you have to look at this and just smile. And you must have an appreciation for the entrepreneurial spirit of the people. This person saw a gap and he merchandised it, and he is making a lot of money. Look at that. Just look at that. I think it is quite creative. Thank you very much for your support. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. The sharing is really important because my channel is being choked and we all know why. Have a great day. Thank you.